Welcome back to Recalibrate Reality, the future of New York. Our guest today is the newly appointed Lieutenant Governor for the state of New York, Brian Benjamin. In this episode, we talk about how he went from serving as a state senator representing Harlem to his new statewide role of Lieutenant Governor, the importance of public safety, fixing the long-standing issues at NYCHA, and so much more. And so now, let's recalibrate reality with Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin. Lieutenant Governor, welcome to Recalibrate Reality. It's great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So you're our first guest for the fall season. You've been Lieutenant Governor maybe for a few weeks now. I thought it'd be great just to open up and give you a chance to just give a little bit of your background from the public service, private sector, so that our viewers get a better chance to know you.
Sure. So my parents are immigrants, came from Guyana and Jamaica. Came to this country with the hopes for a better life for their kids and their family. People who believe in working hard, playing by the rules, and honest days, pay for honest days work. And I was able to go to Catholic school. We grew up in poor communities, and I was able to go to Catholic school and then end up going to Brown University and Harvard Business School. And, my family's trajectory was sort of like poverty, and now they have a nice home in Southeast Queens. Just really the American dream. And I'm sort of an extension of that. And I went to Brown and Harvard Business School, and afterwards, really spent time trying to sort of sort myself out. Scott, I've always had a desire for public service, but I was trying to figure out how to do that vis-a-vis my interest in business and being someone who can do a range of things. I spent a couple of years at Morgan Stanley, where I did investment banking, and then Senator Barack Obama ran for president. I got very caught up in that and actually left and worked on a gubernatorial campaign for Terry McAuliffe, who ended up losing in Virginia, but then won later on, and came back to Harlem and said, I want to sort of build my own sort of political future here. And I was born in Harlem, and so coming back home felt natural, and just got involved, joined the community board, was building affordable housing and preserving affordable housing in Harlem and other parts of, and also as well as New Jersey, and then sort of 2017, Charlie Rangel had retired from Congress. There was a maneuver for the congressional seat. A couple people ran, and I ended up being the person who ended up becoming the state senator, and spent a number of years focusing on economic development and also criminal justice reform before becoming lieutenant governor. On September 9th, I'm the 78th lieutenant governor of the state of New York.
That's great. Great story. So you got that phone call to be asked to be lieutenant governor. Did you know that was coming? Walk us through a little bit what that was like for you.
And when she called me, I was just so stunned. And she said to me, listen, you've been a friend to me the entire time that you've been here. And we've done a lot of good work together. We have similar ideological views. We want safe streets. We want economic development. We want small businesses and communities to grow. And we want to be fair in how we handle things. So ideologically, there's a lot of similarities. And she trusted me. So I said, look, I'm ready to go. Actually, I did not say that. I said, I'll call you back. I met with my wife, and then after my wife said she's on board, then I said, we're ready to go.
That was a smart move, by the way. You got to make sure you need family buy-in before you make decisions
Absolutely.
like that. And and it's interesting because the Governor Hochul and you both have private sector backgrounds that led to public service. So you had the sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and then both feet in. It's also interesting for you is that you now have a governor who was lieutenant governor for 5.5 years, who really, I think, set out her own path and did a great job working around every corner of the state and making an impact during that period. Now as governor, how do you feel as a lieutenant governor, looking at the job she did as lieutenant governor, how you might emulate some of the things that she did and how you might try to differentiate your approach to the job?
Of course, one of the things that I'm seeing as I'm traveling around, I was in Greene County and Orange County yesterday, is she's really beloved across the state. I mean, she was just so sort of focused on just making sure that every voice was heard, handling constituent issues. People were telling me about how they brought a small issue to her and she helped get it resolved locally. I mean, it's just really someone who's just a good, honest, decent person who really cares about the state of New York. And so I look to emulate that part of it, sort of getting around and people knowing, Scott, upstate, I was trying to make sure that people were clear. Yes, I'm from Harlem. Yes, I'm from the city. but we're all in this together, upstate, downstate. If New York State's going to grow and be strong, we have to work together. We have to leverage each other, and we have to make sure that decisions that we're making sort of is fair for everybody. And so I think that was resonating. Also, I spent a number of years in the Senate just recently being the acting presiding officer on behalf of Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the majority leader. So I know the Senate very well. So as we're talking about issues around budget next year, I was chair of the budget committee, right? So the budget and revenue committee. So we talk about the budget next year, talking about trying to get legislative issues passed. I know the Senate, I know the Assembly. I can be very helpful to the governor who didn't really have that experience of Albany legislative activity, helping her and the team make that happen. And, we're meeting regularly, and she's including me in a lot of issues. We just passed an important bill that I had sponsored in the Senate that I now helped her sort of negotiate for signing. So I see myself doing a hybrid of approaches, but part of it is the state being united with her and myself, and then us working with the city and the federal government to deal with some of the major issues of the day.
Right, and it sounds like the concept of understanding the issues that the constituents face and taking action to help address those issues and make those lives better, right? And not just getting caught up on ideological policies along the way.
That is a very important point, Scott. Ideology drives your principles and your values, which is important. But as an executive, if you're a mayor, if you're a governor, you're a president, you have to think about the pragmatic and practical implications of your ideology and when to do what and how to do it, and to make sure that you're being fair. It's where our job is to listen to advocates on all sides, and then have all options on the table, and then make the best decision for New York going forward in the moment. And so, that is something that is very important to me. I bring that up because, when we talk about public safety and policing, for example, yeah. I grew up in the city. I grew up in Harlem, Brooklyn, and Queens. And as a young Black man, I typically was on the other side of the police department, right? And one of the things that is not lost on me is there are some young people who might make minor mistakes and then get caught in a system that can have their lives turned over forever. And at the same time, as a father, I have a daughter on the way. My wife's 8 months pregnant. I want to make sure that she can walk up and down the street safely, right? So how do we make sure that we do all of those things is how you make it happen. Ideology is you want fairness for everyone, but you have to make sure that you're making decisions that are keeping us safe. Because if we're going to get this economy roaring again, and we're on the move, we've got to make sure we handle COVID, and we got to make sure our streets are safe. And we have to deal with the homelessness issue and mental health, but we have to deal with it in a way where we don't use incarceration as the catch-all for all of these issues. We need to be strategic and have almost like a business-like approach to our problems, not a sort of catch-all that's sort of inefficient.
Right. Well, I mean, I think you're describing it well, which is, these are complex issues that require complex solutions, and they're not going to be, ideological slogans aren't going to drive the day. And that's the risk, right? The risk is that an ideological slogan becomes what someone runs a campaign on, sets a tone, and you lose sight of the intricacies and the nuances that underlie these decisions. And I think, you have a good partner, as does Governor Hochul, in Eric Adams, the Democratic primary winner, and who I think has said it well, right? That a prerequisite to prosperity is public safety. And I think we got to find a way to do that.
And Scott, public safety has two components, which I think is very important. There is prevention and intervention, right? So the longer term approach is, how do we help to prevent some of the concerns we have on the street? So that's, making sure that we have adequate education, fair and decent housing, making sure that we're dealing with people's mental health issues, helping to stop criminalize poverty and addiction, sort of dealing with some of the mechanics around that. But then at the same time, you have to deal with the intervention, which is what I was talking about just now of, look, some things are happening on the street right now. How do we deal with public safety in a way that's fair for everyone? I think and we over incarcerate from a public safety standpoint. So it's important as we talk about things like we had a bill less is more to help make sure that if you've already committed a crime, you're out on parole, we're trying to get reintegrated back into society. If there's a technical violation, right? So missing curfew, you might have been drinking, or et cetera, there should probably be a penalty. all this bill said was the penalty should not be reincarceration, right?
Right.
We should scale things appropriately. New crimes, reincarceration, but other things, let's scale this. Let's scale our sort of responses so that we're efficient and we're sort of protecting everyone, and we're trying to be fair across the board.
You talked about everyone having a safe streets, public safety, quality of life. Housing obviously underpins a lot of that, and Governor Hochul tapped you to address something that's been vexed our city and state administrations for decades now, which is the New York City Housing Authority and NYCHA. And as you know, hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers live in horrific conditions, whether there's lead paint, leaks, no heat, that have to be addressed. From your experience, you're uniquely positioned to try to help assess this situation, right? You were in the private sector working on building affordable housing. You grew up in Harlem. You understand what's going on in the communities, and now you're been in government. As you now go on to take this monumental task, and no one expects you to, by the way, there's no easy silver bullet solution that you're going to turn this around tomorrow. But how are you going to even begin to approach the challenge of trying to reform NYCHA and deal with some of the structural issues that exist there?
Well, Scott, it's a great question. Thank you for this. First of all, what we're right now doing is sort of really trying to evaluating what should be the scope of what I'm initially focusing on, because NYCHA is such a huge complex situation that you have to say, okay, well, wait a minute, let's start with this here that we believe is a key domino that impacts other components, and let's address that. So I will say, first and foremost, the state's role in NYCHA has not been clearly defined, right? You have, obviously, we know the federal government played a huge role in getting NYCHA started, and the federal government has primarily walked away from its responsibility. Right now, within the reconciliation package, there is money that's set aside. We would imagine we can get somewhere to 30 billion. I don't know what the right number is, somewhere in the $30 billion range, maybe a little less, for public housing in New York State. That is for capital needs and repairs, right? However, you can repair a roof, you can repair a flooring, you can replace voices, but if you don't think about the whole system, that's a problem, right? And so we have to think about, if the federal government is going to play this role, we hope to get that money. As you know, that a lot of that's getting tied up in sort of DC politics.
Right.
So we hope to get that amount. Okay, well, what are the other components? What are we trying to address? What are we trying to solve? The state has, since I've been here, sort of authorized $750 million to go to NYCHA. It hasn't gotten there yet. Now, there were some mechanics and reasons for that, some politics between the state and the city and difference of opinion. We are now moving forward on that for elevators and boilers. That's a good thing. But we need a comprehensive plan that everyone's bought into. So one of the things I'm hoping we can do is say, okay, between the city, the state, locally, the federal monitor, can we buy into a plan? And then there are different pieces of the plan that everyone's doing and go from there. Let's first focus on what the state can do. Let's lay that out. Let's be transparent about it. And then let's work to get that done. And then after we do that, we'll go from there. But either way, that has to be fully coordinated so that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And that's what I hope to accomplish at least over the next year.
Right. Well, I think your point about all the stakeholders, one thing we have seen that's critical is you need what we call the air game and the ground game, right? You need all these elected officials, whether it's federal, state, or city. But if you don't have the people on the ground, the residents that are living there, the communities that are involved, them being bought in, it's not going to go anywhere. You want a holistic blueprint that people can follow as they move forward, and then
buy in. Because Scott, here's the thing: I used to be chair of my community board in Central Harlem. Toughest job I ever had in my life. The Harvard Business School has nothing on Community Board 10. Okay, and one of the things that was always part of the conversation is everyone always had to swallow something that they didn't like whenever we were doing various initiatives. But the key was we had a whole plan. So people say, you know what? I don't like this part of the plan, but I like that and the other thing. So I will eat this part because I believe that, fully we're going to get to where I need to go. That's how we have to deal with NYCHA. It can't be piecemeal solutions here and there, press conferences, great speeches. It's got to be comprehensive, thoughtful, and let's deal with that. And also, public housing is not just New York City; it's also New York State,
Right.
and so that's going to be part of my role as well. I mean, and actually, some other parts of the state, for example, they are doing better with sort of the commercial issue. There's actually, I believe, in Albany, they actually have a nice commercial facility structure within their public housing. We should be learning from other similarly created entities to make sure that we get it right across the state.
That makes a lot of sense. And as you think through housing, right, one of the things that I point to a lot is, so we have the regulated affordable housing, and NYCHA being the mainstay of that here. But generally in New York, we have a housing crisis, right? Affordable housing crisis. I mean, one of the advantages of New York City is that it's a magnet for talents. People around the world, they want to come live here and they want to come work here, but they can't afford to come live and work here. I mean, our population grows, but our housing stock hasn't grown nearly enough to get there. So if we're going to continue to grow, we need to find other forms of ways to create more housing stock that's affordable, not necessarily regulated affordable, but affordable
Right.
housing for young professionals, working people.
Right.
Any thoughts on that front that you would pursue?
First of all, I have a lot of thoughts on that front, Scott. I used to build affordable housing. I was chair of my land use committee on my community board, and then a senator dealing with this issue. The two main issues that we have to address is the not in my backyard issue and the zoning laws. Okay, so first and foremost, we need a mayor who uses the Department of City Planning to plan for the city. And there has to be a comprehensive city approach to the need where we are looking across the board. And you know what? Some communities that are enjoying zoning laws that sort of restricts affordable housing in their neighborhoods, those are going to have to be addressed. But it needs to be addressed comprehensively. I think this has to come from the mayor. It has to come from City Hall, and we all need to buy into that. And otherwise, we have the piecemeal approach where, quite frankly, there's all these local desires for needs. So for example, in Central Harlem, I remember we were very much always wanting to build more affordable housing, but we had issues because we wanted to make sure that there was enough low-income affordable housing, but you can't concentrate poverty too much, otherwise you have other issues. So trying to figure out the right mix and the right balance for such a huge need, we actually need a comprehensive citywide approach, and every part of the city has to be a part of the solution on that. And if we don't do that, we will continue to talk about this issue for generation after generation. This is something I hope that my hope that Mayor Eric Adams, assuming that he wins, I mean, he's the Democratic nominee, and I'm doing everything I can to help him, but hopefully he wins and he takes this on, because that's the way you got to do it. You have to deal with this issue of not in my backyard and the zoning laws.
Right. And and the thing on the zoning laws also, there's a unique opportunity now coming out of COVID, which there's a lot of real estate that's become competitively obsolete for their prior use, whether that's old hotels, old office buildings that can't be there. So again, if we could streamline the incentives to convert them to housing, whether it's micro units or affordable housing or more market rate housing in Midtown, it's a win-win-win, because it creates Midtown being more of a 24/7 city like we did in Lower Manhattan post 9/11, right? So that would be an area to focus on.
And the key, first of all, absolutely. And the key to this, Scott, is that what the mayor has to do, and I did this, remember when I was on my community board, what the mayor has to do is to really balance two needs here. One is the issue that we need the affordable housing, we need the market rate housing, we need to provide that supply. At the same time, we've got a number of folks who want to make sure that it's done in a way that's inclusive, it's done in a way where the entire community benefits. It's not just some wealthy landlords making all the money. We have to figure out how, when we do this, we ensure that kids in our community are getting access to good jobs, or working on the construction sites, getting opportunities, green energy, and how we sort of think about the future. That all has to be in it, because if it's not in it, then it appears that it's a giveaway to the wealthy, and that creates other issues and sort of can stop some of the good productive stuff that needs to happen. So we got to figure this out in a way where we are sort of addressing the need, but at the same time, sort of doing more than just satisfying that need directly, dealing with some of the other key issues in our community. I believe in public-private partnerships. I said to you before. I think philanthropic efforts, but targeted ones, right? Where we have on new developments that are happening. Young kids who grew up in Harlem in the South Bronx and Southeast Queens and parts of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, that they are part of the solution. They're part of the future, because the rising tide has to lift all boats. If it lifts some boats, then people are going to want to stop the whole party. So how do we make this happen where everyone can participate, everyone can benefit, and we're all in this together? That's how we stop the noise on either side.
Yeah, no, that as you think about it, you want to use the housing projects, the developments, as economic generators that create better equity and opportunity, right? And that means reaching out and job training and getting people a chance for upward mobility through them, which works.
And Scott, that they're new voice to the table. Minority and women-owned businesses, need to be part of the conversation. And I think it's not simple, right? Because as someone who actually participated in one, not all MWBEs are scaled similarly, right? So when we say we want to help MWBEs, we have to be targeted about how we deal with that. We can't just say, oh, we need to hit this 30% goal, but then we don't provide the pipeline and the structure and the framework. Some MWBEs need different development stages. Some just started, some are more mid-tier, and the needs are different. And we have to think about it in a very comprehensive, thoughtful way, as opposed to a headline press kind of way, which doesn't help anyone when it gets down to it.
As you think now, and then I look at New York City in particular, historically there were periods of time of economic vibrancy that the city would thrive, and you'd have people, moving from the suburbs to the city, or you had urban flight, people moving from the city to the suburbs. Today, it feels much more to me that they're intertwined, that the success of the city and the region are one, and that we're not talking about a superstar city, you're talking about a superstar region, and we need to think about looking through that regional lens to provide quality of life, housing, job opportunities, education opportunities. You're in your role as lieutenant governor, that really puts you in a spot where you can drive policies more regionally rather than just city focused. How do you think about that?
No, I think it's important. And one of the first pieces of that is me getting across the state. I only been to Greene County twice. I went to Orange County for the first time yesterday. We are traveling around the state. And part of it is for me to sort of get to know the state and help draw those linkages. I mean, I was standing at a nursery in Greene County, listening to the small business owner, and I could have closed my eyes and it sounded like I was on 8th Avenue in Central Harlem, because the needs, the conversation, are the same. Both are talking about how it's hard to find workers. Both are talking about how COVID has impacted them very similarly. And, some of the solutions that they want from us are actually very similar. The state has to really focus on them, because in a lot of communities, small businesses they're the ones who hire. Yep. They're the ones who are really suffering from COVID. They're the ones who, if we don't keep them stable and strong, everything falls apart. And then we have to provide more public subsidy to everybody. So I want to make sure we do that. I think economic development and our small businesses are a key to that. And the needs are the same upstate and downstate.
You reference small businesses being impacted by COVID, and I couldn't agree more. And I've seen it in the downtowns, while the businesses have stayed out of coming back to the office buildings, then they've stopped supporting the local restaurants, the small businesses, and they're all suffering. And I recently came back from Denmark. I was in Copenhagen, and where I was traveling for business, and it was interesting. It was a completely different world compared to here in New York or the U.S. It was as if they've learned to coexist with COVID. Now, granted, it's a smaller population. They're 75% of the population's vaccinated, but they've relegated COVID from a public health crisis to something like the ordinary flu. And people now are in the office buildings, they're in the restaurants, they're in the hotels, they're having big events again. So it's clear to me that we can coexist with COVID. We just need to lead with vaccinations. And one of the things that we did at our company is we mandated vaccinations across our company, across our construction sites. We were 40% vaccinated at our construction sites. Now across the board, we're in our 99% vaccinated. And we did this, we educated them. We made it convenient for them to get this done. We actually even set up at our construction sites donuts, coffee, vaccine trucks so that people can go through the process. So, it can be done. But, you look at the state right now, you read the headlines, you're seeing some pretty strong resistance from the different unions, whether it's the teachers, healthcare workers, the MTA, the police. How do we overcome this resistance so that we can ensure that we have a prolonged recovery and return to this new normal?
I think one of the things we have to do is to win the argument, right? I feel that, if you aren't vaccinated in New York now, it's because you're choosing not to, right? It's not because you're not aware of COVID, you're not aware of the vaccine. You are choosing not to. And obviously, there are, we do have the issues with those under 12 that that's not available for them yet. So, as you know, the Governor Hochul is focusing on a 12 to 17 sort of vaccination sort of outreach plan that we're all on board with. But if you're over 18, you're not vaccinated right now, that's just because you're choosing not to. So for me, I think part of it for us, because obviously we have to be careful from a public mandating standpoint, is to really sort of make the case, listen to folks, understand their arguments, and then use messengers who they listen to help us make the case to those individuals, right? Public housing, the COVID numbers, the vaccination numbers are not where they should be. Some of our young men of color, the numbers are nowhere near where they should be. So who are the people who we are bringing on board to really help us figure this out? The state had provided $10 million to focus on community outreach related to COVID to some of our key organizations in the Black and Brown and the Asian community. But we've got to think a little broader about that. And we have to be sort of really utilizing the right messengers to help us get this across, because quite frankly, too much is at stake. I am petrified that this thing mutates into a vaccine-resistant strain, and then we're back to ground zero. So it's something that we're focusing on. We have to be careful with what we can do. I thank you for what you've done at your firm, but we're trying to make the case to people, and we have to use language that different language. If there's nothing else you get from this interview, I believe we have to be more customized in how we're dealing with public problems.
Right.
It can't be a one-size-fits-all. There's no vaccines for all mandate slogan here. This is different. Communities have different concerns. Historically, the Black community has a very different concern with vaccines than maybe some others might. We've got to work through that. And, to me, that's worth public dollars, right? You try to figure out, tax dollars, what do they go towards? Keeping us safe. Well, the COVID's at the top of the list. So if we need to use public dollars in a strategic way to help with the messaging, working with the right partners on the ground, working with the churches on the ground. Like I remember in my community, when the churches started becoming testing sites, the amount of uptake within the senior population really grew, because, I can go to Abyssinian Baptist Church, I can go to First Corinthian Baptist Church, and my pastor is actually co-signing this. Okay, that makes me feel more comfortable. We've got to just keep going down that path, and it's not easy, but we have to get it done.
And we've seen the exact same thing with the population of our workforce, right? There's one thing for the people working in our offices, another on our construction site. And what was interesting on our construction site was when their peers were getting vaccinated, that's what brought them along, right? They saw their peers doing it, and they all said, hey, I want to make sure that I'm not, making them not be successful at their job because I'm not getting vaccinated. I can't work on the project. So they went and got vaccinated. So
there was some, and Scott, and there's some people, like I have some younger friends, they got vaccinated because they want to go hang out. And when it became clear that they can go to the restaurants and the hot spots without getting vaccinated, they said, oh, well, I'm not against it that much. Well, so there's different approaches, and that's okay, right? Yep. We have to not be, we have to be realistic about this stuff and just get to our goal. And it's different approaches for different groups of people. Let's just focus on it. Let's be strategic. Let's be targeted. Let's bring in the right messengers. Let's bring in the right supporters, help us think about this strategically and get it done.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So, it was interesting as you go think back to February pre-vaccine, and the world was starting to come together. You looked at New York, and we had this fiscal cliff hanging over us. We had challenges relative to, we said, with the small businesses being able to survive. the people being evicted from their homes. And we got fortunate, right? We had the federal government come and plug big holes in the state government, the city government, the schools, the hospitals. One of the concerns that people have is that between the federal government, the incremental tax revenue that we got from the economy performing better than we anticipated, the higher taxes that the legislature had passed in the last session, is there's all this money coming in. Is it going to be spent responsibly, right? And the number of times you've raised, people using charitable giving to support things, and I think everyone wants to write a check if they could see a difference. The concern is it goes into this black hole of government, and people don't see a difference. How do you make sure that government's held accountable?
One of the reason why I ran for comptroller, city controller, which I was unsuccessful at, was this very purpose. I just think there just has to be accountability around our spending. And my only point is, I just want to know where the money's going, right? I mean, this is something that frustrates me as a former state senator and now lieutenant governor. The great news, at least on our end, is that Governor Hochul feels the absolute same way. We need to have accountability, and the public needs to know that when their dollars are being spent, exactly what it's getting. By the way, we can spend money and have a certain thought of what it would do, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. Let's then reshift and do what needs to be done, but it just can't be going in the black hole. So look, I believe very strongly that the federal dollars that have come in, as you know, they've been very sizable. 12.5 billion came to the state, about 7 billion to education. Separately from that, within the state, we're pumping serious money across the state in terms of education. So there's a lot of money out there. We have to have accountability. It's something that I'm talking about with the governor actually later on today, this topic particularly in terms of how, in my role as lieutenant governor, I can be sort of helpful with my budget experience in making sure that we're holding some of this money accountable, right? Just with the money, I'll give you a small example, the $10 million I was talking about that went to community outreach for COVID and communities of color. I'm meeting with the key players and say, okay, how much was spent? Where did it go? How are the numbers? What's the success rates? Like, are we seeing an impact? Right? It's really simple. Input, output, success, right? So, really trying to bring sort of just sort of somewhat of a business-ish mind frame, just to the point of, how are the dollars actually helping make New York State a better state? How is the money that's being spent in the city helping make New York State a better state? That's sort of what we're doing, and it's top of mind. I can tell you that.
I'm encouraged to hear that, because I think it's critical if we're going to be able to continue to support the state that is a high tax state, that people need to know the money's being spent wisely. So last question for you. I don't think that most people outside the political world realize that you and Governor Hochul have a primary in 8 months in June. So it's not even, it's quick. So when you think about this, how do you demonstrate to the public that you and Governor Hochul have the capacity to lead this state in such a short period of time? Or does that change your style? Does it change the areas of things that you're focused on at this point? Is there low hanging fruit that people can grab a hold of and understand, hey, these are the people that I want for a full term and give a chance to guide our state for the next 4 or 8 years? Yeah,
sure. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm pleased with Governor Hochul about is that she really hit the ground running and ran into Hurricane Ida and ran into man-made disasters that she has really done a good job of sort of helping to steer us through. I believe good government is good politics. I've always believed that. I believe that we will win or lose this election based upon how we govern. With elections so soon after us coming in, I think the question is going to be to the voter, do you like what you're getting, or do you want to do something else? And, the key for us is to make sure that we're being fair, we're being thoughtful, we're being pragmatic, we're holding every dollar accountable. We're not being so ideologically pure that we can't make practical, good decisions for the state, and that we're balancing the needs of upstate and downstate in a way that's fair for everyone. I really respect her for being someone from Buffalo deciding, hey, let me go pick someone from the city to be my lieutenant governor, so that we can ensure that the entire state feels represented, and that we can sort of make sure in all the decisions that we're making, every community is at the table, is in the conversation. People are not going to always get what they want, but they know they'll have a voice, they know they'll be listened to, and they know that the decision makers are being fair in how they are making decisions as it relates to their lives and their kids' lives and their families' lives. And I think if we do that well, you will see us reelected.
And I appreciate your focus on making people's lives better and not getting caught up in ideology versus thinking about the practical ways to get that done. So Lieutenant Governor, thank you for taking the time. Good luck in your new role. We're here to help any way we possibly can, and we're rooting for you.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Be well, be safe. Thank you. That concludes this week's episode of Recalibrate Reality. If we are to emerge stronger from COVID-19, it requires all of us working together across ideologies and geographic locations to overcome the challenges we face as New Yorkers. It sounds like the Lieutenant Governor gets this, and we'll certainly be watching him and Governor Hochul as they seek to lead our state in the coming year. Thank you again to Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin. Thank you to the Regional Plan Association, the 92nd Street Y, and to the team for making this week's episode possible. And thank you all for tuning in. I'm Scott Rechler from 75 Rockefeller Plaza in New York. Thank you.